David Brewster here with a new episode of Soloing Secrets, and this is Leslie West. And it was a couple months ago when I made a Chordplay episode surrounding Leslie and the music of Mountain, and I had a great reaction from that and lots of requests for more Leslie West music, and definitely a pioneer and legend of the electric guitar. And Leslie's career started around 1964, and he initially was a solo artist, under the name Leslie West, and then immediately switched and formed the band Mountain, and extremely prolific, and we're going to talk about that in a second for sure. But definitely, as far as those early, late 60s and early 70s guitar heroes, alongside people like Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Ritchie Blackmore, and that gang, Leslie West definitely fits in that group of players, even though he's commonly overlooked and not usually thought of. Everybody thinks of Hendrix and Clapton and Jimmy Page first, seemingly. But then Leslie West is definitely right there, very essential, definitely helps usher in hard rock and heavy metal, an essential guitarist. So much like we've done in other episodes in the Soloing Secrets series, when you're doing a deep dive on a certain player or band, it's always a good idea to scope out their influences and see the musicians and artists that influence them directly. And that'll reveal, certain things they like to do in their music, licks, and, playing habits and stuff like that. And here's an image featuring some of Leslie West's influences. And some of these players I've definitely featured here in the Soloing Secrets series. But then notice people like Albert King and B.B. King, which reveals some of his bending, secrets. And we're going to hit some of that stuff in this episode too. But here's some of Leslie's elusive musical influences. So I mentioned this during the introduction, but during the late 60s and until about the mid 70s, Leslie West was extremely prolific. From 1969 until 1976, he helped, release 12 albums, which is unbelievable. Like 3 or 4 of those were solo albums, 3 or 4 were Mountain albums. 3 of those were West, Bruce, and Lang, kind of a super group, kind of short-lived super group that had 3 albums. And a couple of those were live albums. Mountain had a best of. So technically, including that best of, that's 13 albums from 1969 to 1976. So when West came out, he hit, the scene running and definitely issued, a huge mountain of music. And as far as Leslie's soloing secrets, the things he typically liked to do when he'd pick up a guitar and play a lick or a solo or a fill or something, and there's a lot. Definitely a blues-based guitarist with blues-based and blues rock influences. A huge Clapton fan. Also really loved, Albert and B.B. King and Hendrix, and there's a lot of players and musicians that he liked. And there's a lot of bending, this really aggressive and very expressive, soulful bending and vibrato with that big kind of woolly mammoth, fuzzed out guitar tone. Definitely Leslie's guitar was massive. It sounded like a big mastodon or something. And definitely the best tone at Woodstock. Mountain played the original Woodstock, music festival. Leslie's tone was like a big giant dinosaur on that stage. So cool. But anyway, here's some of Leslie's soloing secrets. The music and ideas shared in this episode came from 3 Leslie West-related albums, and that includes his solo album Mountain from 1969 and 2 Mountain albums. So anyway, here we go. All right, with the opening jam, that was me playing around with the song Blind Man, and that's from Leslie's, first, solo album, Mountain, from 1969. Obviously a blues-based, riff, and a really cool song. I was using the MXR clone looper to kind of help me out with that, backing riff. And then I just started playing some Leslie West licks, bending moves and stuff. So it's an A, and the riff itself, a lot of Leslie's, single note riffs were almost like leads because they were busy, and there was usually some bending or vibrato and sliding. Definitely a very active, guitarist. But we're in A, and that first riff's like this. Just think A minor pentatonic right there. And you're grabbing that A note, and then that C to A. Kind of move down to that G. And then that, E, D to C. And then start the whole thing over. Right? definitely kind of a cream, vibe right there. In the very beginning, it actually starts with a guitar solo, and we'll talk about the licks that he plays there. But it actually starts in, one cycle through A, and then it moves to the 5 chord, which is E, like this. Right, just kind of hit that single A or that E note, right? And then it kind of moves back into A. And with that backing, I was kind of basically doing this. And that's definitely a lick you hear during that opening, solo. Grab that D and bend it to E, a big hearty bend with vibrato, like that. And then think A minor pentatonic here. And definitely Leslie loved doing that kind of stuff. Index finger bends and smears, when he was bending. And I love that stuff. Where you're hearing that release bend, on the D note, but then you're hearing the index finger catch that C and you bend that too. Really cool. Like that, just smear it. And then eventually you hear, some other phrases and licks. Eventually you do hear this kind of like an opaque or double stop bend where you're kind of smearing it. And definitely Leslie loved doing stuff like that. Think Mississippi Queen and famous, mountain songs. Bending with the 3rd finger on the B string and then catching a higher note with the with the pinky on the high E. Right? And then he starts doing where he's basically just kind of, gradually picking through that D note on the B string. Really cool. And then you hear definitely more of that kind of smeared bending. And he does it on the lower strings too, like that. And definitely that's something he probably picked up from Albert King. Definitely those index finger, bends. Albert King was a master of index finger bending. But you could do it here. You could move it up here on the D string. You could do it way up there. And you're really just, like I said, bending and releasing, a higher note and then catching a lower note with your index finger and bending it. Like that. Really cool bending stuff. So check out that song, definitely, Blind Man. And you'll hear Leslie doing stuff like that all over the place. So cool. Next up are some licks and ideas from the song Silver Paper, and this came from the Mountain album Climbing. And it basically, it starts with this intro riff and verse, and then it gets really quiet with this kind of bluesy riff. We're going to look at that bluesy riff, which is quiet, and then it gets loud. And we're also going to look at some licks from this song too. But the quiet part's like this. Something like that. It's pretty basic. We're in A and A7, and we're playing with this. So the quiet part, we're kind of playing with that that E, F sharp, A, and B, right? And then you keep hearing them slide that F sharp, and that open A, and then it's A to G back there, right? And then a hammer on G to A, and then start it again. And right there, it's where you start hearing this B kind of bent to C. So it's really just a riff, but it's definitely treated almost like a lead lick or a solo. And then you basically do the exact same thing, loud. And then right there, like, when it gets loud, he starts bending that G kind of seemingly up into A. Right? Something like that. And eventually you hear the opening to the guitar solo, and it's something like this. more time. It's like grab him by the throat kind of opening right there. And once again, he's doing that kind of compound bend where he's bending on the B and then catching notes, you know, on the high E with his pinky. And right there, he's bending that B up to C sharp and catching E with his pinky like that. And you're going to basically bend it up. You want to bend it up and then you're going to release it back down. Like that. And then you got this, you know, F sharp to E. So that F sharp to E and then this A, F sharp A to B. So, and at the end you want to catch that A, B, and then bend that to C sharp, like this. You know, and everything has that big meaty bend with vibrato, you know, really cool. And same song, Silver Paper, there's another lick, definitely kind of a Clapton-based lick like this. Really cool. So 2 bends on that G up to A, and then G to E. Grab the C note, bend that up a whole step, and you're going to come down like that. You know, that C to A, G to E. Grab the C note, grab D, and then bend that up to E. Like that, something like this. One more time. And it's really cool the way it comes down and then ascends with a bend at the very end. Like that. You know, really cool licks in that song. Next up are some ideas from the song for Yasgur's Farm, and this came from the Mountain album Climbing once again. And this first thing, it's basically a series of fills that revolves around this series of like these super heavy power chords. And it's not really that hard to play, but you hear a pinch harmonic, which you got to think this is 1970. That's a very early pinch harmonic in there. And it's just the aggressive phrasing and the attitude, but something like this. Something like that, kind of short and sweet here, but 2 F sharp power chords there. I'm sorry, 3 F sharp power chords like that. And this is where you hear the squeal. It's not really like a Zakk Wylde Dimebag Darrell squeal, but for 1970 you can hear, you definitely hear a squeal in there, kind of that pinch sound. And then move to E right there and do the same riff. Like that kind of gallop, like a slow gallop. Right there, just grab that B and bend it. Kind of play with that C sharp. And then you're going to basically grab this E and bend that up. And then right here, it's basically a B major over F sharp. And I totally love that change where you're coming down. And then right there, you know, really cool. And he's doing right there he does. And then it's just D to E power chords after that. You know, really tasty. Another phrase from Yasgur's Farm, and this is actually at the very end of the song. It's the last lick that you hear, like this. One more time. So he's basically, you know, grabbing this B note, bending that to C sharp, and that A to B right there with vibrato. And then a huge position shift into the octave higher location right there, because we were right here. And he's moving basically into that, you know, same position on an octave higher, but he's doing it on the D string. you're going to slide into that, that F sharp note there on the D. And that's the higher part of the phrase right there. So here. And that kind of phrasing is really common in today's world. It makes me think of people like Zakk Wylde and some different players like that. But you have to think once again of the time frame. This is Mountain, 1970, and there's Leslie playing like that. Definitely it's making me think of Slash and a whole bunch of modern guitarists, but that's Leslie, the pioneer and innovator, way back in the early 70s. Alright, last but not least are some licks and ideas from the song Don't Look Around. This came from the Mountain album Nantucket Sleigh Ride, and these are great examples of Leslie's kind of aggressive blues rock phrasing and licks. Something like this. Something like that. So he starts with this pull off C to A, and this G note, slide that off, and then you've got this smeared bend. You're going to bend this D up and down, and then once again you're going to catch the C note with your index finger, and then you're smearing that too. Like that. So cool. And then the second phrase, so you're doing that pull off C to A again, bend that C to D and kind of hold it, and then E, and then C to A pulled off. Like that. And then start it again, that C to A pull off. Grab that C and bend it, hold it on D. And then release it, and then you're going to basically do this A, G to E, and then this C to A. Definitely kind of an Albert King lick right there. Like that. And then this last time right here, this is hard. That's what you're going for. He's basically bending that C note on the B string, but he's also catching A flat on the G, but it's not really like a double stop bend. I think he's just kind of over fretting the note and catching a little bit of that A flat on the G. Because you hear that, but it doesn't sound like a traditional, it's not like that. It's really weird. Like that. So you're gonna do that bend. You're gonna basically do that A to C. Then you're gonna bend that C to D 3 times. So that last little lick is hard because you're doing that weird catch bend. Something like that, if I can get it. That's a really interesting, phrase happening during that song, and it's just all that aggressive blues rock phrasing. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Soloing Secrets with this look at Leslie West. Definitely a legendary, pioneering guitarist, hugely impactful, hugely influential too. And you got to keep in mind, he influenced everybody around him. They heard him playing, they heard his tone, those bends and pinch harmonics and all this cool phrasing and stuff. And definitely, Mountain just exploded. And they were so prolific, like I talked about during the intro, you couldn't help but notice Leslie's music and guitar, whether it was solo work or with Mountain, or some of the work that he did with Jack Bruce. Definitely a great guitarist and sorely missed in today's world. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.